Do you want to be able to do an absolutely insane amount of AoE damage while also maintaining a high single target damage? As well as being an absolute tank and not taking any damage, basically never even needing to heal. And even if you wanted, you could AFK while your minions do all the work. I got the Necromancer build for you. What's up, world? Distributor, back again with a video. Today we're checking out all things Diablo 4, specifically the Necromancer build. And I have the absolute best build that I could possibly make. I just hit level 25, so I did this day one. I pretty much bursted through it. I got DC'd once. But regardless, let's just jump right into the build. And I'm going to explain everything about the build, kind of essentially what it pertains to with all the skill points and all the talent points. And then we're going to go through all of the minions as well, to the Book of the Dead. And I'll kind of go through that. So I'll explain everything that I can, and we'll go through all of it, just to be sure that you kind of get it down. So first up, let's refund the skill points so we can go back to ground one. And I can show you level by level how I kind of made this build. Okay, so first up, we're going to go ahead and take Hemorrhage. Hemorrhage is such a good ability. This thing absolutely is needed. It gives you so much fortify. It does decent single target damage, but that's not what we're looking for. We're actually looking for one of the perks here. So these blood orbs are pretty good too, and they do actually grant you HP. Like I said, this build, you're never going to need to heal, honestly. Maybe on a boss fight or two, but you really shouldn't. Next up, we're going to go to Initiate's Hemorrhage. This is the ability that's going to allow us to have an insane amount of defense while also maintaining a decent single target output. What you could do is, after taking Hemorrhage and taking the second rank, you could go ahead and skip this if you didn't want to fortify right away, and I would go right into Bone Spear. Once you get Bone Spear, you should be able to go right into the Enhanced Bone Spear, and then you can go ahead and take the 5%, the Paranormal Bone Spear as well. Then we'll go ahead and we'll come back and we'll take that Initiate's Hemorrhage. And the reason why you want to take this route instead of this one is this only does the first enemy hit, makes it vulnerable, and you're going to be hitting a ton of different enemies with this ability, so I would not take that. Okay, so moving on, you can see that we're down here below, and I actually have an item that gives me Blood Mist, so for now we're not going to take Blood Mist, and we can just go ahead and we can either add into our Bone Spear, or we can go ahead and take the Corpse Explosion, which I would do. Now, Corpse Explosion is one of the best abilities in the game by far. It's just much needed, and we only really need it at rank 1 for the entirety of this build because it's just that good. Now, we're also going to take the radius increase. That's going to help us out a lot, and I stick away from these two as they don't really help that much. But next up, we'll go on to actually regenerating some mana here, and because our build is going to be constantly running out of mana, and we also want to maintain our skeleton build, so we can go with two different things here. But I would go ahead and either increase your minion damage, so I would do that 3 first, and let's just go ahead and we'll increase our minion damage. And again, we're going to kind of skip over here, so we're not going to come to this area here until we get our second minions. Now, you might get this Skeleton Mage Mastery. If you're not there yet, if you haven't got your Skeleton Mages, then I would come back here and take Consuming Corpse Harvest. And I would just do this as much as you can because you're going to be spamming this and just doing insane amounts of AoE damage with it, but also being able to do a lot of damage with your Bone Spear, and it's going to regenerate mana for you. Now, this isn't like the increased mana one that was up here that wasn't really good for Sorcerer. This is actually a really good one because every time that you consume one of those corpses, you're then going to generate mana, and it really is needed because you can basically spam your Bone Spear, and Bone Spear does a ton of damage. So we're going to go ahead and take 3 into Grim Harvest. Now, at this point, you should get your second set of minions, so I would go ahead and then take all 3 into your Skeleton Mastery. Again, we really want to beef up our minions here. Now, if you wanted to, you could come back and take 1 or 2 into Bone Spear and just kind of up the damage a little bit if you're seeing the damage isn't good enough. So I would go ahead and put maybe 1 in there just to get the damage of Bone Spear up, as you're going to be kind of going along and things have to, everything scales to you, so you definitely want to pick up that damage. Now, as we come back down here, you're going to see the rest of the tree. Most of the stuff isn't going to be utilized, and we already have a ton of fortification, so we're not going to utilize anything on this tree itself, but we're going to come back up here, and we're going to go ahead and take this Death Embrace. Now, the reason why is because close enemies take 2% more damage from you, and they deal a lot less damage. This is just going to be a flat damage increase, and so I would take it no matter what. We're going to go ahead and pop all 3 into Death Embrace. Now, we'll go back up and kind of finish off Bone Spear because we do need to get down to here so we can get more abilities. So we'll go ahead and we'll finish off Bone Spear, and we'll just put that to 5, and that will give us a lot more damage increase overall. And as we come back down here, then we're going to go into the, in my opinion, one of the more broken abilities, which is this standalone ability. And it probably, we're going to go ahead and pop 2 in there to finish up our points. And it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to you. Again, we don't have a lot of abilities here why we would take this one. But if you see, we just gave ourselves a 12% flat reduction on damage as well for each minion. And since we have 8 minions, or at least I take the 8 minions, we're also going to have 16%, so we're going to have a total of 28% damage reduction. That is an absolutely huge stat. That is incredible, and it's going to make us basically a tank. We're going to take all the damage in the world. Now, we'll go over an ability or two that you can kind of swap out on this build, because it is a very strong build, and it will do a lot of damage. Again, we really only need 1 in the Corpse Explosion. We really only need 1 on our main attack ability, although you could do 2, but I noticed that the increase didn't really help with damage, especially in AoE scenarios. Now, the one that you could swap out is for Death's Reach. You could knock out Death's Embrace and go ahead and take Death's Reach, because it does do 12% more damage to enemies that are far away. However, I really like taking this damage negation, because it just does it makes you like an absolute tank. Like you're not gonna be eliminated or taken out, especially on a hardcore character. And this build actually does an insane amount of damage, and you'll see from multiple clips throughout this video, it just does a lot of damage already. Your minions are super tanky. They're gonna take a lot of damage. They're gonna deal a ton of damage for you. And overall, it's just a really good build. Now, if you want to swap out some abilities like the Grim Harvest, or whatever you want, you can then go ahead and take Blood Mist, which I usually do. So I'll have Blood Mist on my bar. Now, the rest of the abilities you'll see in the tree, they all take Essence, and you really don't want to be using your Essence on anything except Bone Spear, because Bone Spear just does so much damage, and these abilities that break off into different shards and things of that nature really do a lot of damage. But we'll move on to the Book of the Dead, so that way you can see all the talents I do take within there. Okay, so now we're on the Book of the Dead, and for Skirmishers, I do take Skirmishers. You could swap these out for Reapers. I do got to give these more of a chance. But for right now, I'm taking the Skirmishers, and I'm taking the middle ability, as you could raise 1 more, which definitely would increase your damage reduction by another 2%, which would be nice. However, I do think that the critical damage bonus is just a lot better overall. Next up for Skeleton Mages, I do go ahead and take Shadow. Now, if you really were running into mana concerns and you didn't want to take Grim Harvest, you could switch out for the Cold or even the Bone. However, Bones, they're constantly falling down and they're constantly being eliminated. And so that means you're losing your damage reduction if you're losing these minions. So you really want to keep them up. So I would go ahead and either take Shadow or Cold. And again, for Shadow, I take this far left ability, the Stun ability. This one, I really don't think helps that much. And it's just I'm not a fan of it. Now, for Golems, I obviously take a Golem. They are pretty nice, and they're going to be really good for boss fights. They also add that extra 2% damage reduction, and these things are very tanky. And again, they're going to, if you see here that in the upgrade, which we take on here in the left time, each time your Bone Golem takes up to 20% of his maximum life, which is going to happen a lot during boss fights, it's going to shed a corpse, which means that you can then explode the corpse, get your mana back, and so this is going to be insanely useful during boss fights. But that does about cover it for today's video, and if you liked it, like and subscribe, and to the next one. Deuces.